To comply with Section 2.2, 3712D of the Code of Virginia, it is necessary for the board to certify that since the Fairfax County School Board convened a closed meeting on December 9th, 2019, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board during the closed meeting. Do I have a motion? Motion made by Mr. Moon, seconded by Ms. Evans. All those in favor? That is unanimous. We are now back in open session.
All right, thank you very much. So before we go for final vote on this document, legal counsel will, division counsel will take a look at specific language and give us recommendations on any changes that he believes are necessary. So if we could then go to page 68. Again, Mr. Moon had, I believe it was Mr. Moon, had a recommendation to specify that, yes, it was Mr. Moon, specify that the superintendent's summative evaluation would be approved by a majority vote. Mr. Moon, did you want to speak to? I think that's good. Okay. So with that, it would simply come, I'm catching up here, 68. Okay, so after, at the very end of, let's see. Okay, so at the very end, the full personnel document will remain privileged and confidential, but a summary of its conclusions will be made public. Is that where, Mr. Moon, is that where we would say and approved by the
second sentence?
second sentence?
Second
Okay.
sentence is the board will use these reports and the superintendent self-evaluation as a basis to develop an overall summative evaluation.
So develop and approve.
By majority vote.
Okay. So, all right, let's see how that works. The board will use these, the basis to develop and approve by majority vote. Do we need to say by majority vote or just approve?
As long as, board has an opportunity to actually approve something.
Right,
Because summative evaluation will be what
right.
will direct the superintendent to do.
Okay, does that do it, the two words? All right, how many people can support that? All right, very good. We'll make that change. If we go to page 70, Mr. Moon is suggesting we, in 3C,
70, page 70.
page 70, C3, the chair, because we've added things, okay. Okay. All right.
C3, Sandy, the seventh.
C3, yeah.
It is about a board member's use of professional development funds. It's about
Ms. Mulberg, can you go down just a bit more?
certain expenses associated with non-political education-related community events to be authorized by the board chair. I think it will be onerous on the part of board chair to approve every line item that the other 11 board members will bring to him or her, especially in light of the fact that if he provide additional resources at each board member's discretion. I mean, board members' use of the funds allocated to that board member will be a closely scrutinized by the voters, residents of Fairfax County, and they are accountable to the voters. Should free up the chair from that obligation, and also board members, do not have to get up, shouldn't be asking, chair for the permission to use the fund.
So are you recommending simply eliminating the sentence? Eliminating, all right, how many people can support eliminating? It's C, it's right above new member orientation, it's that last, it's right there. Oh, I see. All reimbursements for events under B shall be authorized by the school board chair. Ms. Corbett Sanders, did you have a comment?
Just deleting the whole thing.
Are you saying deleting all of B, or are you saying
All of
only?
C,
All of C.
requiring chair's authorization.
What I think Mr. Moon is saying is, if a board member has expenses associated with non-political community events, they don't need to go to the chair to get
Right.
permission to authorize reimbursement. That'll just be taken care of itself. That's what he's suggesting.
Yes,
So, Mr. Moon, I have one question, which
Yes.
is regarding the use of professional development funds subsequent to the election and before the new board comes in. So if a board member wants to incur expenses associated with professional development, even though they will not be a returning board member, is
they will remain as is,
Okay.
because I have not, that's a specific language for just for that 2-month duration, November and December. There was
Correct.
put in for reasons in the past, whether I agree or not, but
Talking about
D?
C.
No, but
No,
what
no,
I'm,
no, she's
D
talking about-
actually,
she's talking about some other provisions. There was,
the only provision is the current C being authorized by the chair, and then D is only for travel.
oh, that D on page 71, okay,
Correct.
okay. Okay, I was looking at small c's and small b's, and, I'm sorry.
Ms.,
Oh, that D, no, I don't have as much concern for that.
Okay.
Capital D.
Ms.
And my
Strauss?
concern was with small c on page 70.
Mrs.
And that's
Strauss?
as an ongoing board member, but what I'm talking about is board members going off the board and wanting to incur,
That section D, that's the section capital D on page 71.
that is only for travel. It doesn't talk about if you want to buy a library or something.
Travel and expenses for school board members elect.
You could do travel and other expenses.
Travel and other expenses.
You know, as I said, with the additional funding provided, the next board will need to have that discussion. What do you pay for with additional funding and what's not? And probably will all come to that decision. D is an outgoing. Mhm.
If you modify D to say travel and other expenses for outgoing board members,
But as I see it, if board members get, for example, $100,000 per year, there will be, even for the last couple of months, will have expenses.
correct.
It could be community events, could be hold, that will require expenditures, et cetera.
Well, hang on a second, let's go in order. Are we still discussing the earlier one, that's the 3C?
I was on
3C,
page 70,
3C.
3C, small c.
Then, but you're raising a different issue then.
I'm raising a related issue, which is, it's one thing, you certainly don't want the chair being responsible for saying, yeah, I approve your expense and I don't approve your expense. I think that as long as we have good guidelines, that's the appropriate thing to do. Where it gets a little mushy is when we have an outgoing board and someone decides to make a large expense, which may not be really associated with the ongoing, the going concern of the school board, but rather as something to take with them.
But are you suggesting a change to D also, or no?
So what I'm suggesting is go with supporting Mr. Moon's elimination of C,
Okay,
but then modifying D, large D, or uppercase D, to read travel and other expenses.
I see, okay. All right, I had Mrs. Strauss?
I am assuming that with the new board, I mean, traditionally, there is a certain amount of money set aside to be spent on professional development, and I'm assuming that is the intent, that there will still be a constraint on how much money you can spend, right? Well, even for those coming in. I mean, we have always had a limit. Correct. Yeah, and there have been times when people have overstepped some of those limits from time to time, and the chair has said no. So it does occasionally happen.
Ms. Keys-Gamarra?
So if you
Oh, sorry.
take the, I don't know what you want to do with that. It doesn't happen very often, but it has been abused at times.
So are you suggesting
know.
that all reimbursements in excess of?
Yes, of the agreed on, yes. I would recommend, I would,
That makes sense.
yes, because
So
some,
you're saying keep C, is that what you're saying?
all
Or we-
reimbursements for events beyond the annual budget allocation for professional development. Per board member,
Board member,
right,
without a permission.
right, another. Well, we have, I know,
They want to.
I know. Well,
Okay, so Mr.
Yeah,
Mr.
but
Moon, what are you thinking of Mrs. Strauss's idea that we retain this, but have it only be for things that might be beyond
because you have to
their
go back into the budget,
amount.
and you're
So in
asking.
excess.
In excess, yeah.
And would it be for events or other expenses? Because it's not necessarily an event.
Okay, Madam Chair, this is how I see it. I don't know what the next board will do with the professional development funding, and assuming the next board will get $100,000 each, and use part of that to hire a staff person, and there will be some money left to defray the expenses for the office. And part of that expenses could include some board members or staff members attending community events, which may have tickets to pay for and et cetera, and they don't have to come to the chair for authorization. They have that office expense account they can use. So C won't be needed. C won't be needed. D, Trevor, if they are doing the Trevor, using their allocated allotted office expenditure, they will be up to that school board member. But if we have a separate PD account, and there's a money still sitting there unused, and then retiring board members try to use that, they might require school board chair's
Right,
authorization.
well, however it is, I think there has to be some statement that there is some limit to what kind of expense you can incur. That's my only concern, and I don't know where to put it.
So my
but-
advocacy is to still eliminate small c,
Okay,
keep large D.
keep large D. But it's not just for outgoing board, it's just regular board members.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
I'm with
I once was in the position of having to tell a board member no. So,
So what are you suggesting then, Mrs. Strauss? Are you
well, I just,
suggesting?
I guess, in looking at this entire document, is there any acknowledgement at all that there is some limit to how much board members can spend? I mean, that's
And
That's
if a
just the
bo-
big
if a board
picture.
member doesn't have money, he or she is not gonna be able to spend.
No, and that's, so in the governance manual, does it refer to funds, that there is a limit, that's all? I don't care how you want to, it's got to be up to them. But since you guys worked on the governance manual,
Well, I'm just looking at above, each board member is responsible for his/her use of professional development funds. in accordance with these various things.
Where are you reading that?
That's above, that's in
What page?
2, well, it's R 69 and 70, under salary, professional development, and reimbursement. C3 above, okay, shall be so you'll be reimbursed at the same rate for mileage, shall be reimbursed for this and that. It doesn't, I see what you're saying, Mrs. Strauss, that I don't see where it says there's a particular budget for it.
Yeah, because you really need to put that in there, because you could have an unlimited.
Will be paid for out of the allotment per board member and authorized by the school board, the chair.
Where are you looking to
The
put
C
that?
that he was trying to,
Oh, to put it in C?
yeah, all
So to-
reimbursement.
Okay,
Going down.
okay, so we're now, so you're saying replace C
Right.
with,
Well, I would modify it. All reimbursements for events under B shall be paid out of the board members' budget allocation.
Yearly budget allocation.
As, and if you want some authorization by the school board chair, you can have that,
Yeah,
Reimbursements in excess of those amounts must
shall be approved by the school board chair. Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that at least puts some,
That cuts
Okay.
down on the amount of arguing,
right.
right. Does that
okay, so
help?
I'm writing that down, but I had Ms. McLaughlin also, and then Mr. Moon.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
were
No, go
they,
ahead.
was I next? Because I didn't
You
want.
were next, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So then, with respect to D,
Well, let's deal with
Finish
C
C?
first, though, okay? Can we deal with C?
okay.
So Megan, were you going to address C? Or no?
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that we have, there's things like, we're talking about travel, then we talk about events, and so sometimes you're not necessarily traveling to go to an event, so I just want to make sure the language ends up being logically consistent.
Maybe
Well,
if you
C
say
isn't
all,
limited by travel, it's everything,
or
right?
all reimbursements.
C right
for-
now says
For
all.
expenditures under the, as you carry out.
Yeah,
your
Karen, if you look up at C right now, it says all reimbursements for events. So
why
if we
not-
want to
so
change
why-
that word.
So why not
is what
just say
I'm-
all reimbursements
Right,
For
shall be?
expenditures incurred as part of your official duties.
Can I help the board, I think, with
Sure.
one thing, Sandy?
Yeah,
This is, I think, the issue that Janie is raising for the board to decide to help inform the next board. I decide I don't want any staff members. I'm going to just keep what I have, but I'm going to spend my allotment completely on professional development to travel multiple places.
Worldwide.
Is the board fine with, I didn't want to get staff, but I do want to travel and go to these different conferences to learn about best practices? Or should professional development have its own built-in cap that is a lower amount than the full distribution
'Cause that's
for each board member?
traditionally
That's what
traditionally what we
she's
have
getting
had.
at.
Yeah.
Right. and
Like, I can't,
I did not intend, let me just say as one board member, I did not intend to fund anyone's worldwide travel. And I think we are talking about your duties as a board member. So that professional development issue should be a different bucket in my thinking.
So this is reimbursement for, in a different section, we just approved something about professional development and saying that professional development funds were within each board member would determine how they would use it. This is for reimbursement for travel and expenses to go to conferences, et cetera, et cetera. So if we just take out for events and say all reimbursements shall be paid out of board members' yearly budget allotment, then that's the problem. So what about saying yearly professional development budget allotment?
Why not just say
So line item budget allotments? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. What?
Well, my concern is I don't know how it's broke down in the budget. So for the school board. So it needs to line up with that.
Could I provide context? I don't remember how the governance manual was written this way initially, but initially this was, the reason there were two different provisions was based upon the question that came out from the board's discussion about use of the professional development funding. For example, we have, let's say, board member is at $2,500. And the board members will attend VSBA conference or NSBA to use the funds, but there may be other community events where board members get invited to, but need to pay to attend. And where will the money come from? Was the issue. And then they would come out of the same PD account, but those will be authorized, need to be pre-authorized, pre-approved by the chair. And when I was a chair, that there were requests and I had to deny, and was unpleasant conversation you have to have. And I don't want future chair to have to go through that. And each elected official should be responsible, accountable for the use of the funds allocated to that person's account. I mean, that's how I see it.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure, A, that we somehow made sure C was consistent and clear. And then the second thing that I think is weighing on my mind is when I joined the board 8 years ago, the professional development annual allotment per board member was $4,000. And then our school board office noted that not everybody was needing $4,000. So when we were looking to be more streamlined with our budget, we knocked it down to, is it, Eileen, 2,500 or was it 2,500 or 2,400? 20, I think it went lower than that.
Cut our budget.
But the board, bottom line is we cut it. And so I know that then it became a challenge of if you went to VSBA and NSBA, then you were done. And I was serving on the community schools subcommittee with Skipped, and there was a conference in Baltimore. And so our clerk of the board did say, well, certain board members didn't go to VSBA or NSBA, so there is funding in the pool. Now, this past year, I didn't go to VSBA or NSBA, so I didn't spend any of the 24, 29, whatever 100 that is. But that's where I think the challenge becomes a little bit of when we went so tight and it was, 4,000, it's fine if we don't use it sometimes. But I think now the number got so low that being able to go to just our 2 annual associations and then anything else that might be related to some of the specific work that we all do, like the one I went to, it becomes just a problem. So maybe we just, where I'm looking at all this is, it's been great when board members aren't necessarily horse trading the funds, but it is looking at collectively as a board of 12, that is a line item we have. I don't want to watch one board member just taking up the money, but the conversation, the ability to work with the chair and the vice chair to say, where are we with the funds? Because I know plenty of board members have been very nice in saying in years past, I wasn't going, so.
So, Ms. McLaughlin, to your point, if we kept this basically the way it is now and then allowed the board chair to authorize amounts in excess, that would enable the chair to say, we do have some extra money. Sandy's not going to the conference, you can take hers.
Right.
Then I think that language would work, but I've got 2 other. were
Yeah,
you
that's fine.
finished?
I wanted to put that out there for everybody because
Okay.
I think it's important to somehow have that
Have the
flexibility there.
flexibility. Ms. Strauss?
Yeah, I was going to say, in 2011, we were cutting tens, hundreds of millions of dollars out of the budget, and so we took positions out of the school board office as well as our own.
This happened in
pockets.
2015, after 2015.
Right.
It's happened a couple of
Yeah.
times.
Okay, yeah, I know, but that
Right.
2011 was it.
Ms. Keys-Gamarra?
My concern is the buckets we were talking about earlier, right? So that if you're saying, are we talking about, oh, I can use, maybe Ms. Strauss didn't use all of her allocation, so I can use that? Or are we talking about going into a whole different category from the salary that I didn't use for whoever. I think those are two different things that we need to have very clear here, because that's not the intent.
So how
And
would you?
I really don't want to put the chair, any chair, whoever that might be, in a position to say, no, you can't go to wherever you're trying to go, China, whatever.
So what is your
Uh,
advocacy
sorry.
so what's
You
your
can go to
advocacy for C then? What would you say in C?
We're still talking about, I'm happy to hear what your suggestions are, but I think we're still talking about events rather than, I mean, do we have an allocation just for, it sounds like we do, right? Just for the events? Okay, and it can't seep into the, otherwise, I think we're gonna have to be very careful about any additional funds allotted to a board member and then having to correct something after the fact. So I'm just trying to clarify.
So does that language work for you? The way it is now, yeah.
Reimbursements alone is not specific enough, in my opinion.
So what should it say?
Well, I was okay with events, but I think someone else disagreed with that.
Okay,
So-
Scott and then Karen?
I think this may be the simplest. You already have professional development as a budget line. So you're saying in C, all reimbursements shall be paid out of school board members' yearly professional development budget allocation reimbursements, and access must be authorized by the board chair. I think you're gonna need to be clear with the school board dollars of support you talked about earlier today to decide how that will be distributed. Will that be allowed? I think that's where Ms. Strauss is going. Would that money be allowed to be converted into a professional development account? And when you get to that, so I don't know if you need to do it here, or when you get to that money, it may only be used for X, or it may not be used for travel. You don't have to solve that part tonight, but you may want to clarify whatever you end up doing with those funds, that they will not include travel, not include professional development, only to be used for staff supports.
Okay. So can I see a show of hands, how many people can support this change? Okay, great. And then we want to go down to D. Is there are changes in D that
Right.
we were, and Ms. Keys-Gamarra, I think you had some other thoughts on.
Well, I'm not sure I know what the answer should be, but it says, school board members in the last 2 months of their terms who will not be returning to the board for the following term may be reimbursed for travel to conferences and meetings if they will be representing the school board and chair and has approved their travel in advance. So I may take it back. As long as the approval is required, I think I'm okay.
Okay. Any other changes to this section, or are we, Ms. Corbett-Sanders?
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, okay, so let's see how many people can say "and other expenses." Okay, so we're done with that, thank you. Next, we go to, it used to be page 74, so it's probably about page 76 now, regular meetings. And the governance committee noted that we have a requirement that we report out from work sessions, and we just haven't been doing it. So we wanted to note that for the board and have a conversation. Governance is saying we should do it. We think we should do it, but we just wanted to make sure that since we had not been doing it, that we're cool with that. Okay, Ms. Corbett-Sanders?
I fully support doing this. I actually think that once we finish the governance manual, what would be very helpful is to do a compliance checklist that says these are all the things that we've committed to as far as our meetings, as far as just standard, review periods, things like that, so that we actually have a checklist that makes it very easy rather than having to read through the 121 pages.
Okay, Ms. McLaughlin?
Just briefly in that section 4, under work sessions, the second sentence says, any action taken at such meetings will be announced at the next regular business meeting. So it's not necessarily indicating that we're going to give a summary of what the work sessions are. It's only if we took any action.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, very good.
right.
Good point, yeah. Mrs. Strauss?
Now that everything is televised, I don't know if it would make sense at regular school board meetings on the agendas, and then when the minutes appear, that there's a hot link to the video transmission of work sessions. I don't know, I'm just asking whether or not that would make sense. It's in board docs. Oh, it is, okay, and is it attached to the regular school board meeting minutes? Right, but again, it's always when people are searching for. Oh, it does, okay. All right, okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
so does anybody have any problem with just continuing this? If not, we'll move on. That, we just wanted to highlight that for everybody. The note can be deleted, yes, thank you. All right, under what used to be page 79, school board communications. This is going to require a little bit of discussion about, a couple of people have raised this on the 2 hours, and how do we, I guess, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, you had wanted to talk about the possibility of logging this. We're under school board staff communications, and it's your page 79. And it would be, yes, okay, so if you look for request for information by the board for a simple email, blah, 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 one that will require less than 2 hours, we're dividing it up by more than 2 hours or less than 2 hours. For questions or inquiries that will require more significant time, i.e. more than 2 hours, the request must come from either the chair or the vice chair, or a majority of the board must agree to the request. So did you have a proposal that you wanted to add in there?
Well, when you and I spoke about this, and we had a subsequent conversation today amongst all the board members and Dr. Brabrand, it's really having some mechanism that logs these requests and the follow-up to them. The benefit of that is that many board members may be asking the same question of different people, and so by having a log and a disposition of the request, it makes it easier for people to say, oh, I'd like to see that, or no, I don't need to see it.
So you're suggesting that we add a reference to some sort of a log in here?
Sort of tracking mechanism, yeah.
Okay, the request work session. Okay,
I could support that if it's the tracking for the more than 2 hours. I don't want to, I would prefer not to have to track every email that comes that can have a person answer in less than a 2 hour span of work. The more than 2 hour where we're going to go and go, yes, that's significant, but it needs to be done, the board wants it, and we can track and follow those.
so then I guess that would be, such requests shall be sent directly to the superintendent for assignment as appropriate
And track.
and tracked.
And tracked.
Toward, to completion. Okay, can I see how many people can, no, okay, all right, Megan.
I have a huge problem. I don't know where that language came from. I sat on governance, and I can tell you, I was never kosher with saying something that might take more than 2 hours is suddenly got to have a green light coming from the chair and the vice chair, the majority of the board. I mean, I would like to know if the board of supervisors have that kind of handcuff on themselves with their county executive. The bottom line is we are asked to do governance and not operations. So if I send an email, and I rarely that I'm aware of send something that's required 2 hours, I don't know where it came from. I'm not really comfortable with it, but I can tell you that I don't recall ever having a conversation that if it's going to take more than 2 hours, now you've got to have chair and vice chair sign off it, or the majority of the board.
I think it was language I brought at a retreat a couple of years ago about trying to distinguish between routine work that can get done and work that may require more time. And if 2 hours isn't the number, let's figure out what that number is. It just not trying to track there are hundreds of emails that fly every day. To track everyone is just woof. I'd rather take ones that are gonna take more time of staff, that give me pause. And I think the great majority of your requests are gonna fall inside the 2-hour staff time limit and will be handled. And if they're not being handled, please let me go back and go, guys, this isn't a big issue, follow up. Those that might be more, I can just go and work with the chair and get those tracked to make sure, yeah, it's more, but this is important and we need to do it.
I appreciate that, Scott, and
That's just
spirit
my
of
point of view.
collaboration, but that's not how that reads.
Yeah.
And it absolutely does read a little bit like it takes, a board member asking for information and an LT member saying, well, that's going to take me more than 2 hours. And now suddenly, you're as board members, when we're already saying we don't have staff, we can't speak to operational issues, and now we got to go around and lobby 6 other school board members or the chair and vice chair to agree that a request we've made for information is got to get author. I mean, I just think this is, again, I want to go to equity of respect for the Board of Supervisors, unless you're telling me that they have to be policed by each other and have to get authority to go ask something of the chair or the county executive, then I am
So,
not
Ms.
comfortable
McLaughlin,
with drilling down to this level of
What is your
control.
advocacy for this? I know
I know,
you're,
but Megan, can I help you on this, please? Yeah.
Go right ahead. My whole point is, this is drilling down to
Right,
such
I
a
understand.
level that I'm not comfortable.
I think the real objection here is not whether it takes 2 hours or more. It's approval to ask a question. That's what this looks like.
Okay.
I think that's right. And so hopefully, I think that that's where the real rub is. Am I correct, Megan?
so
Well,
what?
yeah, it's getting approval to say, I've asked for information, and Scott, this is to protect you and your team first. I send something in, your team says that'll take more than 2 hours, so Megan, you go find support from the chair and vice chair, or if there are others. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna be sending out an email going, I asked this information for my community, and they said it was gonna take too much time, and they're not gonna produce it. It's not a good look for the system, and it's not a good look for the board.
So is your advocacy, Megan, to remove that or what? And Ms. Keys-Gamarra, you had said you
Yeah,
had some
I think at this late hour, I don't see how we sort through this. I think that if, Scott, you want to build a really important set of expectations with the new board, I fully support that, and we can talk about workload on LT, but we shouldn't be putting this in the strategic governance manual at this time.
If I can maybe
ahead.
help you this time. I think maybe what you're trying to get to, Dr. Braybrand, is if it is a more time-consuming request, that would then become a part of the tracking system that we could follow, not necessarily to require permission. So I understand your concern, and I think that perhaps that was your concern.
Right,
So
and if
maybe
if I find out it's months or it's a lot of money, I would want to figure out some way to go back to the chair and go, yeah, this can be done for a larger conversation. And I
So-
may not know at the time of when the request is being made.
So I'm not sure we can resolve this today,
No,
but it
maybe I
looks
can-
like.
Maybe I can work,
Right, and maybe you're looking for a tracking system for requests that require a greater
Yes.
resources to resolve, but it's not a matter of permission.
But to be clear, that's how that
I understand, the
reads.
language
Yeah.
we have is unacceptable.
Well,
That much I,
So is your advocacy that we take out
I
that,
think I had
that
it
part
from a
that's
previous
highlighted there and simply have it be that that those requests will be sent directly to the superintendent for assignment and tracked to completion, and take out that section that's in there? Is that your
Oh,
advocacy?
that Scott wants to just
can
track
can you say that
those.
again, Sandy? Say that
So
again.
in other words, if the issue is requiring permission, require more significant commitment, i.e. more than 2 hours, such requests shall be sent directly to the superintendent for assignment.
That's fine.
And tracking.
That's
So
fine, that's fine.
So can we
Yeah,
all
and if I
agree
have
with
a
that?
concern, then I can broach it at chairs or with the board member. Yep,
Okay.
that's fine. I'm good.
Okay,
Thank you,
and
Ms. Evans,
Ms.
that's
Hines
good.
has been trying to speak to.
Yeah, no, that's okay, thank you. I mean, I can live with that, I'm leaving the board anyway, but I think there's that we've always talked about figuring out how to triage, right? And as one of 12 board members, I think I've sometimes
maybe not personally, but I recognize the issue for other board members that, well, if there are, 2, 3, 4 board members who are constantly using staff time, that slows down what I need to have answered. And so this is also about sharing board time or staff time for the board. So I think that the board should give the superintendent some respect to come back to a board member and just say, look, this is going to take a lot of time. And I'm going to have to work with, and I think the rest of the board has, or at least the chair and vice chair on behalf of the rest of the board, have the right to be in that conversation. It's sort of like, okay, because they are maybe keeping a pulse of who on the board is taking a lot of staff time. It matters. I mean,
Right.
it does.
It does. But I think what Dr. Brabrand is saying, that he feels he can work with individual board members to say what you're asking for would take, basically a doctoral degree,
Right, and I
3
think-
So-
years. So
Yep.
can you
And I
narrow
th-
it down to?
Right, and I think if school board members now have staff,
then
they're
they
going to
can help
ask
out.
even more questions. If that goes both ways.
Yeah,
We discussed
so-
that earlier.
So here's the thing. I think as we work with the new board and set up our own norms and work, that I can be clear for this paragraph, it's more 2 hours, I'll assign it. If I find out it's 2 weeks, 2 months, I'm gonna come back at a chair or go back to the board member and go, hey, this is not what's possible. And that you all, I'm empowered to go back and have that conversation without having it to be built
So,
into governance.
With that, can we keep it as is, although we have to add back in such request should? That needs to go back in. And then the such is lowercase.
Yep.
So, okay, how many people can approve that? Okay, very good. The next one is, the old, and this is along the same lines, page 82, D and G under next steps. There was a desire to discuss staff workload under that. And I believe that was
Ms.
Mr. Moon.
Evans, I think they came from me, but I'll leave that to next board
Okay.
with a norm setting.
Okay, all right, very good. In that case, we go to
Ms.
page,
Ms. Evans, may I ask you whether it is your intent to complete
yes,
all the work that needs to be done tonight,
it is.
including public participation?
No,
Okay,
I guess I
wh-
should have
okay.
mentioned that. Thank you for raising that. We've got 2 discrete pieces here. One is citizen participation, and both the former PEC chair and the current PEC chair have agreed that this probably is something that the new board needs to address. So our advocacy is to postpone that piece as well. And I did have a conversation with Ms. McLaughlin about the forum
Forum
topic, feeling the same thing, that really that's something that the new board is going to have to live with. So we're going to postpone that as well.
Okay, because we'll soon be losing the quorum.
Right.
That's,
And so, yes, in fact, are we going to, do we have a quorum? I guess we do for another.
I'm leaving now.
Okay. So we have to get Karen back. Can you wait for 2 minutes, or no? Okay. So then the next one, we've only got a couple more things that are on my list. Boundaries, this should, hopefully is quick. Page, it used to be page 83. And Ms. Corbett Sanders suggests that we reference up at the top in the note that this will happen after we get the consultant report. So hopefully nobody objects to that, reference to that. So if we could just reference it. So in other words, the governance committee recommends referring section to CEP for review and rewrite after the board receives the consultant report on this subject. On new policy. And then similarly on page, Oh, yeah, Ms. McLaughlin?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little
Ryan?
uncomfortable that this has been, in my 8 years on the school board, this section on the process guidelines here, while we wait for something to get done, to just strike it out so we're silent as a board on this.
Well,
I
that's what governance
find-
recommended. That is what governance recommended.
I
Well,
don't
it was
remember
a
saying
majority
that-
vote, I can tell you that.
No, I don't remember saying we'd have nothing, because I don't know how you can have nothing in your governance manual. I mean, you have to have something in place until something new takes its place.
Well, we can keep it in there if you
So-
like, Ms. Hines.
Perhaps, we do have actually policy and regulation that guides this, right? So maybe we could make a note here that we will rely on existing policy and regulation until that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so rely on current policy regulations, policy and regulation on boundaries, pending the review of CPDC, following the consultant report. Can everybody agree to that then? Oh.
Recommendations to the CPDC. Or into the, we just
Well, CPDC would follow the consultant report.
which is.
Right. Okay, so we can work on that note. Okay.
CPDC and
Yeah,
go
yeah, yeah. just
CPDC
because
review.
it's-
And
the
they'll
community
review
wants to make
that, they'll
sure-
review other things, public input, the consultant
Exactly.
report, whatever
Yeah,
else.
see, because as the community wants to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that the board and the community, everybody else is in on whatever's going on.
Okay, so we'll make that note at the top. And on page,
Process for whatever change.
the old page 94, which, social media, again, Ms. Corbett Sanders, I think rightly, wants us to note that not only will this be referred to PEC, but that it will undergo a legal review as well. To PEC and, yeah, Eileen, to PEC and Division Council.
Yeah.
Okay, and with that, then we have completed all but two pieces that unfortunately Ryan had to leave. He, I guess he's going to have to make his advocacy at another time, but Ryan wanted to keep the SAGs in there, the student achievement goals. So, well, I mean, I guess the question is, do we want to discuss that now without him here? Ms. Hines?
Well, yeah, I think we probably, I agree with you that he should have to make that advocacy himself, but I guess I would just ask, so governance decided to take them out, is that right?
Right.
Okay, and the reason being that we have different goals now, right?
We have different goals.
That have, I think, superseded, so I agree with taking them out.
Okay. Does anyone else have a comment about it? Ms. McLaughlin?
Yeah, I know that we made changes based on that. Our monitoring reports became our goal reports, and we updated this with the strategic plan, but to my knowledge, we didn't eliminate our student achievement goals, correct? No.
We cut them out, yeah. Governance cut them out.
But what I'm saying is,
Been cut
did
out
this,
for 2 years.
right, but is it that because, I understand what governance did to update the manual.
Right.
My question is, can someone refresh my memory? Because this was a long time coming since we did
Yeah.
the strategic plan. We chose, in the end, as governance, to keep the operational expectations in this manual because nothing speaks to the operational expectations in the strategic plan. And it was about our operational expectations of the superintendent and the division. So student achievement goals, unless we're saying that these, we don't ask staff to be accountable to these on an annual basis, it's not something that they specifically work to or report on, then I can see eliminating them. If it's that we still believe in them, then I guess one option would be similar to some of these other sections that we're referring to PEC or we're referring to the division council. We could say this should be reviewed or referred to the new board's consideration. I want to be careful. There was a lot of work that got put into this, but if it turns out we just don't operate to it anymore, then there's no point in keeping it.
Well, my understanding is that, because I can remember sitting right here and having Dr. Garza say, we have new goals, these are being eliminated because we have whole new goals. We did put a lot of work into it, I agree. Ms. Strauss, did you have a?
I
I'm sorry?
guess- So
But-
they're being moved. Okay, good. That's exactly. And they're going to be
So-
in the appendix.
So they're,
Ah,
so they're going to be in an appendix now as,
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because that. Appendix. Yeah, yeah.
I'm only asking what appendix, because I think it matters. The whole question here is if I'm a new board member or a person in the community,
yeah.
looking at all of our various goals and measures and reports, we went into a lot of trouble to put together the strategic plan,
Right.
and we continue to work on it as a way to measure and report out to the community. This is confusing to me. If it's an appendix that says this is historical information, that's fine with me.
So where is it in the appendix? So the theory is we're going to move it to an appendix as a historical?
Yeah, if it says historical information, I'm okay with that. But if somebody can look at it and say, oh, you're supposed to be measuring, reporting out on this, that's confusing, right?
Corbett Sanders?
Is the intention to include this in the revision notes, since this would be a significant revision? So it would go into revision notes, similar to much of the discussion on OEs has been noted in the revision notes as well.
No, it's not in there now. But it wouldn't just be revision notes, because the revision notes would say it would just say it's been moved from the body of the governance manual into a historical appendix. Megan?
Exactly. I mean, I agree with Pat that we want to title it within the appendix, historical notes on student achievement goals.
So we don't lose it.
So we don't
Okay.
lose it, but then also people also know when they look at student achievement goals, they understand it's
That
It's
that's-
historical
that's
context.
historical. Okay, Ms. Strauss?
Yeah, because one of the challenges that when we keep working on these things and, with our strategic plan and, trying to focus things, there is, I think, importance in looking at sort of an archival piece of it, because people will say, well, don't you care about these other things? And we say, well, yes, we do, but we are focusing on this other piece. It isn't as though we don't want to teach these children these pieces. So, because if you don't include it, somebody comes back in and says, takes us to task for never thinking about or defining them. So archival piece is good.
So if we could then go to page 12, and I did save the page 12, yeah, because Ms. Corbett Sanders had something there, and I think that might take a little bit of time to chat about. And then when we are finished with this, it will just be kind of open comments on anything other board members want to discuss in this manual. So Ms. Corbett Sanders, you wanted to talk about the goal reports and the timing on the goal reports. Strategic plan, goal reporting. And I believe your advocacy was to talk about when, get a time period, correct? So did you have a suggestion for us?
No, it was just trying to add structure so that we ensure that we have a periodic time where we address things every year. It seems like a good governance piece. And maybe it's, in advance of the superintendent making recommendations on his budget, but something that clarifies that there's a relevance to the reporting to how we make decisions.
So do other people have thoughts on what the timing of the goal reports should be? Personally, I understand the reason behind what we did this year. I think there are some that don't have to be right before the budget personally, but I'm not going to be returning to the board, so Ms. McLaughlin?
So I appreciate Ms. Corbett Sanders picking up on this, and it's something the board talked about at the business meeting this past Thursday, which is that we need to really establish a calendar, both for the board and for the superintendent, to understand that when is the expectation that these annual goal reports will be presented during the year, but also when will the board then review the annual metrics that are going to be expected as part of these goal reports? Because right now, it's just in conversation, but we don't have anything that we specifically have here. So even for the new board members or the public and existing board members, if we have something here, maybe it's going to be a to be determined, we put in this section, but it helps the new board understand that we really need to work with the superintendent to have that clarity of a seasonal timeline every year, so people know when these things are taking place. This is such a critical piece, and right now this is in narrative form. I'd actually like to see some bullet points put here.
It's kind of the thought process that we know that every January we deal with the capital improvement plan. We know that every May we agree to a budget. We know that every January, the early January, the superintendent presents his budget. So we look at these, to make these reports relevant, we need to actually time them in a way that allows us to use the data to make sound decisions.
So if your advocacy is doing it before the budget, would it make sense to say that these goal reports would be in the first half of the fiscal year?
Ms. Evans, I recall talking with Dr. Braber, that he had shared with our board that he's trying to move these goal reports to a logical time period of when they get the data, staff does the analysis, and then they bring the reporting. So I don't think tonight we would necessarily know what time of the season or what half of the year without him being here, but I just know that's what he had indicated was.
Ms.
Dr.
Evans.
Ivy has a response.
Is it best that the board is going to be reviewing the metrics and everything that's in it. So one suggestion might be, as we are reviewing the metrics and working on that we also then determine when the best timing would be for the reports. Because as you change the metrics, we have to determine when the information is even available and can be compiled and analyzed.
So are
to
you suggesting we
report out.
should be silent on the timing for the time being until the
we have
board
an
has reviewed the
opportunity.
metrics?
Yes, that would be my.
Or TBD.
Or, yeah.
So Ms. Evans,
Yes, Mr. Moon?
are we adopting this revised tonight, or?
I'm hoping that we can. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can, because it's scheduled to go on, we're scheduled for final approval next Thursday.
That's what I mean. Final
Yes.
approval will not be until the next meeting, because
Right.
I am about to leave.
Okay, so I think this was the only thing that I had left from anything that people had recommended. I think what other people need to do then is, before the 19th, if people have other suggestions, they can draft an amendment to it. So I guess the only thing we have pending is, do we keep this as is for now? And either there's an amendment before next Thursday, or we hold off until, as Dr. Ivy said, the new board has an opportunity to review metrics. Or did you have another suggestion, Ms. Corbett Sanders? For this section. I mean, this was something that Karen had raised.
Yeah, I'm just trying to give good discipline. I guess my suggestion would be,
Well, of course, the new board may have a different view of it, too.
yeah, of these,
Of when it, so, Should we just say a general at established times of the year and let the new board determine what that is going to be?
I would be fine with that. I just want to,
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Clerk, it sounds like that's consensus. Okay, very good. And can I have a show of hands of those who are okay with this document for now? I guess, okay. Well, so there, we're going to have a vote on next Thursday on final approval. It's been posted, I think, for a while now. So hopefully we can finish this up. Anybody with other amendments, please get them in as soon as possible. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.